This is Stephen Wallace, and this is my presentation, College and University Mottos, History, Language, and Culture. Here is some information about me. The short version of this is I went to college at Rice University, and after some other things, I went to Cornell University and got a PhD in linguistics. I taught linguistics for several years. I then went to law school and worked as a corporate lawyer for many years. I'm now retired. That's what I look like. I'm going to talk about mottos. Many organizations of all kinds for years, if not centuries, have had a motto. What is a motto? Well, the word motto comes via Italian from the late Latin word mutum, meaning a mumble or word, from the verb mutire, to mumble or speak softly. Motto has been defined as a brief statement used to express a principle, goal, or ideal. And maybe mottos back in the day were an early version of what is now called a mission statement. All right, let's look at some mottos. Our country, the United States of America, has a motto, "In God We Trust." This was officially adopted by Congress in 1956, and there you see it displayed on the back of the $1 bill. Many organizations have mottos. For example, the Olympics has a motto in Latin, and we're going to see a lot of Latin as we go through this program. Their motto in Latin means faster, higher, stronger, which are the aspirations of a lot of athletes. Many, if not most, colleges and universities have mottos. Here, as an example, I'm going to take the University of Kansas. Why Kansas? Well, it's located more or less in the middle of the country, at least the continental United States. And it was founded at a time during the 19th century when a lot of colleges and universities in this country were being founded. Well, there's its motto, also in Latin. The first phrase, ad astra, meaning to the stars, goes back to some Roman writers, Virgil and Seneca the Younger. But in Kansas, they tacked on this other phrase, per aspera, meaning through or with difficulties, to reflect the difficulties, frankly, that they had in founding the state of Kansas and founding this university. Now, before we move on, I want to make a couple of comments about the structure of mottos. The first one we see on this page is a full sentence. It has a subject, it has a verb, and it has a complement to the verb. The Olympics, it's 3 words strung in a row, and you will see that this is a common format for mottos. Why 3? Well, I don't know. I call it the magic number 3. So anyway, I want to just point that out. In this presentation, I'm focusing on the mottos of colleges and universities. And we're going to start at the beginning with the University of Bologna, founded over 900 years ago. It's viewed as the oldest university in the world, the first institution of higher learning to award degrees, and its founding gave rise to the word in Latin, universitas, which is the source of the English word university. Well, there is their emblem, and it has a motto around it, Alma Mater Studiorum in Latin, which of course was the language of teaching and learning and education back at that time. It means nourishing mother of studies. And it is in fact the source of the term that we use in English today, alma mater, meaning an institution where you went for education. Many colleges and universities in this country were founded by churches or religious organizations or religious people. And here we have a number of these religious institutions and their mottos. You see, well, they're mostly in Latin, again, going back to Bologna 900 years ago. There's one in Greek, a quotation literally from the original Greek text of the Christian scriptures. I'm just going to leave this on the screen for a little while so that participants can see these different mottos. The one that may require some explanation is Georgetown's. In Latin, utraque unum, meaning both are one, or sometimes translated as both into one. It's a phrase that goes back to the Christian scriptures. And I won't go into what it originally might have meant, but in terms of Georgetown, what they seem to think it means is that reason and faith are both one. In other words, they coexist. Well, those are mottos of what were originally founded as religious institutions and are now still religious institutions. This category is mottos of formerly religious institutions. A number of significant colleges and universities in this country were originally founded. Well, each one has a separate history, but the short version of this is they were founded by churches or religious groups, or they were associated with people with very religious influences. And you can sort of see here these various mottos that these places have. The one I want to comment on is Dartmouth. Here is, in Latin, Vox Clamantis in Deserto. It comes from the Latin version of the Bible, known as the Vulgate, and it's how John the Baptist described himself. He was the voice of one calling out in the wilderness. Well, why would Dartmouth in 1769 have adopted this as its motto? Well, New Hampshire in those days was not exactly near an urban center. And so maybe they thought this described their situation in those days, the voice of one calling out in the wilderness. Well, anyway, you see these others, mottos of formerly religious institutions. And by the way, Princeton also fits in this category, but it has a separate story that I'm going to talk about later. Here's another category of mottos from colleges and universities that focus on practicality and service. And you see at least a couple of these, they have the magic number 3. But if you sort of scroll down through these, the ones I want to talk about specifically are the last two, Illinois and MIT. These are not the magic number 3. They're sort of the, interesting number 2. The first element, learning, and at MIT, the translation is mind. That focuses on the intellect. But the second element, labor and hand, focuses on the practical application of intellect. Well, that's the substance. Just as a note, I want to mention learning and labor, mens et manus. There's a literary or rhetorical device here at work called alliteration. That is the repetition of the first consonants of words. And it's used to highlight something or make something more memorable. And we will notice that a number of mottos have this feature. In fact, if you go up to the top of the page, Claremont McKenna's motto in Latin, Crescit cum commercio civitas, all those C's in a row, which in ancient Latin were all pronounced with a K sound, Crescit cum commercio civitas, that's another example of alliteration. Service. We have the military academies. Here are two of them. The Air Force Academy, Integrity, Service, and Excellence. West Point, Duty, Honor, Country. The next category are mottos that focus on knowledge and reason. You can sort of read down through here. Most of them are in Latin. There are a couple that are in Greek. The ones I want to focus on that I think are especially interesting, the Coast Guard Academy, the sea yields to knowledge. And then the Naval Academy, Annapolis, the translation is from knowledge, sea power. Well, in Latin, it's literally from knowledge, the trident. Well, what is a trident? A trident is that three-pronged spear that the Roman god Neptune, the god of the sea, is often shown holding. So the trident, I assume, is a symbol for sea power. Cornell University is kind of a special case. It doesn't have a motto in the traditional sense, but they use this statement by one of their founders, Ezra Cornell, who said, "I would found an institution where any person can find instruction in any study." Well, it's sort of worked out that way. If you go to their website, they say that they offer instruction in over 100 subjects. I studied linguistics at Cornell, but if you're interested in learning how to grow apples at Cornell, you can study pomology. And there, where they are located in upstate New York, growing apples is a big industry. And so they support that industry. And the most popular variety of apple in that part of the country is the Macintosh. That's what it looks like. And you may be thinking, oh, what about that company in Silicon Valley? Why did they choose the word apple as their name? And why did they choose this particular variety of apple as their icon? And additionally, why do they spell it differently from the original spelling of this real variety of apple? Well, as they say, to investigate this, I'm going to make this an exercise for readers and listeners. Here's some more mottos. NYU, there is alliteration again, plus a little fun playing with Latin. You go down the list. The University of Hawaii has a motto in Hawaiian. Not surprising. University of Houston, I went to their law school, but they started out life as a junior college almost 100 years ago. Their motto in Latin is in tempore, meaning in time. And I think that they probably adopted that on the theory that, well, we are here starting in a very modest way, and we hope to grow over time into something more significant, which they have done. Oregon. This is a fascinating one. In Latin, mens agitat molem, mind moves mass. Some more alliteration for you. It's a quote from Virgil's Aeneid. Somebody has said that a more poetic translation of this would be minds move mountains. I think you could see why a university might want to adopt that as its motto. Yet more, you can see these there on the screen. The one that's, well, I'm going to talk about two of these. One is South Carolina. It's a verse from the Roman poet Ovid, and it actually doesn't have a subject to go along with the verb, but in the translation, which I will read, the usual translation, learning humanizes character and does not permit it to become cruel. Well, that's something to think about. The last one, the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, somebody's really having fun with Latin here. The motto is Fortiter, Feliciter, Fideliter, which means boldly, happily, and faithfully. Well, there's the magic number 3. And look at all that alliteration, all those F's in a row. Plus, I have this sort of a feeling that it might be a riff on the motto of the Olympics. You remember the motto of the Olympics? Faster, higher, stronger. Well, I don't know. Now, here we come across a really interesting subject. There are a number of universities and other institutions of higher learning around the world located in places that I think would not have had a tradition of learning or teaching Latin, but their mottos are in Latin. I think this is just fascinating. I mean, Georgia, Turkey, Korea, Russia, Ukraine, South Africa, and Indonesia. Well, I'm going to talk about a couple of these. This university in Turkey, Hacettepe in Ankara, I've read that it's very large and very prominent in Turkey. And apparently, they had a motto in Latin, Timeo hominem unius libri, which means I fear a person who has only one book. Well, think about that. Supposedly it's attributed to Thomas Aquinas, but think about it. I fear a person who has only one book. Well, Turkey is a complicated place, and what seems to have happened over time is that this university was they either decided on their own or maybe there was outside pressure to get rid of that motto and adopt something different. And if you go to their website, it says their motto today is to the leading edge toward being the best. Then something kind of interesting and funny, the University of Cape Town. Where are they located? They're located in a very significant and prominent geographical feature at the southern point of the continent of Africa called the Cape of Good Hope. So, what is their motto in Latin? Spes bona, meaning good hope. Here we have some mottos with stories, and we're going to start with the University of Pennsylvania. You know, one of the organizers of this was Benjamin Franklin. Well, their motto is in Latin, well, the translation, laws without morals are vain. Well, okay, I think we could understand the meaning of that, but why would a general educational institution not a law school, but a general educational institution, adopt that as a motto? Well, they tinkered with the language over the years, and so it always hasn't been exactly like that. But they finally adopted this in its current form in 1932. And then I guess it's been the subject of some thinking about, why does our university have this motto? Okay, here I have a quote, again, going to their website. In 1956, these faculty members concluded, and there's this long explanation going back to various Roman things. And then they conclude by saying, this is the faculty committee, this ancient concept, far from laying stress on law, rather deprecates law when it is not founded upon and supported by sound morals in the body politic to which it applies. This stress seems to us a significant one in any age, and a particularly appropriate one for an institution of higher learning in our own time. End of quote. Well, there's a maxim that applies to a lot of things. If you have to explain too much, you're losing your audience. So I'm not quite sure what all of this is about, but there it is at Penn, one of the leading universities in the country. More stories. Here we turn to Stanford. There is Stanford's emblem, and there's their motto, Die Luft der Freiheit weht. It's in German. Well, David Starr Jordan, the first president of Stanford, promoted this motto. It means, in English, the wind of freedom blows. It's attributed to a German writer who supported Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation. But he had some opposition. One was the secretary of the Board of Trustees who favored the motto, simply in English, truth and service. But there were some members of the board who wanted to use the Latin motto, semper virens, meaning ever flourishing, perhaps in reference to the botanical name of the California redwood tree. The botanical name is Sequoia sempervirens. Well, the First World War came along, many things German fell out of favor, but President Jordan's proposal prevailed. And so Stanford's motto today is Die Luft der Freiheit weht. As a little aside, look there in the middle of that emblem, that plant. It's called the Palo Alto, which is a Spanish phrase that means tall stick, and it refers to a redwood tree. Princeton. Princeton's official motto is, in Latin, Dei sub numine viget, which is translated as, under God's power she flourishes. All right, why she? Well, in Latin, the word, it probably refers to the university. In Latin, the word university, universitas, is of the feminine gender. So that's probably why they translate that way. Well, okay, that goes back to their Presbyterian roots. But in 2016, 7 years ago, Princeton adopted an informal motto. They have never rejected or deleted their original motto, but here is this informal motto. In 2016, they had a ceremony there on the campus in a prominent place, and they unveiled this stone medallion on the ground to display their new informal motto, which is in the nation's service and the service of humanity. The University of Virginia, founded by Thomas Jefferson. Here you see what is on their website as how they identify themselves. There's the name of the university there, in words, in print. And then there's this symbol. It sort of looks like maybe a building. Well, did the University of Virginia ever have a motto? Well, after some research and consultation, I have not been able to find that they ever had a motto in the traditional sense. But maybe in lieu of a motto, Virginia has a visual symbol, which I showed on the previous slide. It's a building called the Rotunda. And here is a quotation from their website about this. The Rotunda at the University of Virginia was designed by Thomas Jefferson as the architectural and academic heart of the university's community of scholars. The architectural and academic heart. Thomas Jefferson was a very learned man who studied all kinds of subjects. He had a large library, lots of books, but he was also keenly interested in architecture. He modeled this rotunda, this building, on the campus of the university after the Pantheon in Rome, a temple built around 1900 years ago. Here are photos of the rotunda at the University of Virginia and the Pantheon in Rome. They have some striking similarities and they have some differences. One striking similarity is you just look there, you're struck. They have all these columns in front. The Pantheon has 8 columns. The Rotunda has 6 columns. And there at the front, the columns sit on a sort of entryway or porch-like structure. The architectural term for this is the portico. And above the columns and above the portico is a triangular space called the pediment. Then the buildings themselves are round and they're topped with each with a dome. One interesting fact is, well, I don't know about the dome of the Rotunda in Virginia, but the dome of the Pantheon in Rome, it's the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world. And this is after 1900 years. Well, those Romans, they knew how to build things. What Jefferson seems to have done here is he paid homage to the ancient Romans, not by using their words in the form of a traditional motto, but he copied their architecture. Now we come to my alma mater, Rice University. The founder, William Marsh Rice, was a successful businessman who started his career in New York City and moved to Houston, where he made a lot of money. Well, when in New York, he became familiar with Cooper Union, formerly known as the Cooper Union for the Advancement of Science and Art. Well, this is an unusual educational institution. They offer degrees in only 3 subjects: engineering, architecture, and fine arts. They have a faculty of humanities and social science who teach those subjects, but they do not offer degrees in those subjects. Well, when Mr. Rice founded Rice University, he wanted to expand the scope of what was originally called the Rice Institute to include not only science and art, but also letters. So here you have these 3 words: letters, science, and art. Now, before I embarked on this presentation, if you had asked me, well, what is Rice's motto? I would have said letters, science, art. It's there. Well, from what I can tell, that was never actually adopted as Rice's motto. The words are there on this academic seal, but if you look at Rice's website today, they say that this academic seal is not to be used for general purposes. It's only authorized to be used by the Board of Trustees and the President for official purposes. So, what then? At some point, Rice refreshed its branding and now uses this logo similar to that of the University of Virginia. You see on the left, there's a symbol. It's a shield with some figures on it. And there's the name of the university. So a shield, what does a shield mean? It probably represents strength. But instead of words, the shield has three owls associated with Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom. Why three instead of two or one or five? Again, it's the magic number three. Another category of mottos focuses on light. We start with Amherst College, the alma mater of my daughter. The translation of their Latin motto is, "Let them shine light on the world." Them doubtless refers to their graduates, what they're supposed to do. We move down to Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey. This is an odd one in Latin, but translation is, "Sun of justice, shine also on the west." Well, what does that mean? Well, you read that at some point in the past, Rutgers had an association with the University of Utrecht, whose motto is, in English, "Sun of justice, shine on us." Well, that phrase, "Son of justice," goes back to the book of Malachi in the Bible. Well, they added these other phrases, but when you think about it, Rutgers in New Jersey is to the west of Utrecht in the Netherlands. So that probably explains that. Swarthmore, mind the light. It probably goes back to their Quaker origin. The University of California, the motto there, it comes straight from the Latin Bible, the Vulgate, very early in the Latin Bible, the third verse of Genesis, "Let there be light." And the University of Colorado, a quote from the Greek original text of the Christian scriptures, "Let your light shine." More light. You see all these places, New Mexico, North Carolina, Washington, Wisconsin, and Yale, all focusing on light. The final category I'm going to talk about is truth. We start with Brandeis. Their motto is one word, the Hebrew word for truth. Bryn Mawr College, my wife's alma mater, truth. Then there's Caltech. You wouldn't think that Caltech would have a verse from the Bible as their motto, but there it is. And then famously, Harvard has one word for their motto. They're displayed on their logo, the Latin word, veritas, meaning truth. Johns Hopkins has that same verse from the Bible. Here are others who focus on truth. Yale there wants to get a twofer, both light and truth. Well, that's good. SMU, that same verse from the Bible, from the Gospel of John. Northwestern, this may require just a little bit of explanation. This quote from the Bible, it comes from a long sentence. This phrase is the start of the sentence. Whatever things are true, and then it mentions a whole lot of other topics. It goes on and on and on. And it concludes with a verb saying, think about these things. So basically, what Northwestern is saying, in short terms, think about the truth. I have some observations and advice. Latin doesn't have much of a life anymore, but it certainly has an afterlife in various areas. Think about the world of medicine. In your arm, your lower arm, between your elbow and your wrist, there are two bones. They're called the radius and the ulna. These go back to Latin words. And of course, these are just two of many, many, many Latin terms in the world of medicine. Then there's the world of law. It's full of Latin words and phrases. For example, a motion in limine. In limine in Latin means at the threshold. And before a trial, a lawyer will often make to the court a motion in limine to exclude various evidence, primarily on the basis that it would be prejudicial. Then most lawyers are licensed in their home states and they're not authorized to practice in another state. We're talking here in the United States. But this day and age, just given all the interstate commerce and everything, it often happens that a lawyer who's licensed in one state might be involved in a case or proceeding that's pending in a court in another state. So that lawyer wants to appear in court in that other state. So that lawyer makes a motion in that court in that other state to appear pro hac vice, as they say. In Latin, pro hac vice means for this occasion, meaning for this one occasion. In other words, that lawyer doesn't want to practice generally in that other state. That lawyer just wants to appear in that one proceeding. Then the world of biology is full of Latin, the scientific names of animals and plants. The common frog, its scientific name is Rana pipiens. Rana is the Latin name for frog, and pipiens means making a small noise like a chirp or a squeak. In my front yard, I have two big trees known as live oaks. They're common here in Texas and eastward throughout the South. The botanical name of this tree is the Quercus virginiana. Quercus is the Latin name for oak, and virginiana, while it's Neo-Latin, that means pertaining to Virginia. I guess they were first identified in Virginia. Well, these are just some examples, but have all these mottos. The ones that I've mentioned, I won't say they're the tip of the iceberg, but they're a chunk of the iceberg. And again, they're just from the United States, and they're not all of the ones from the United States. I've had to be selective. And when you think about Europe and Canada and Latin America, all the way from Mexico to Chile and Argentina and Australia and New Zealand, you have lots and lots and lots of Latin mottos to the point where you can almost use this corpus of Latin mottos as the basis for teaching Latin, Latin 101. Well, in an appendix to this presentation, I mentioned some features of Latin grammar that appear in some of these mottos that might be of interest to anyone who has a focus on Latin. Okay, to recap the substance of college and university mottos, we obviously have a lot of religious expressions. We have those focusing on practicality, service, knowledge, reason, justice, excellence, intellectual endeavors, and especially the last two categories, light and truth. But I have to say, after having gone through all this, that mottos are on their way out at colleges and universities. They seem to be viewed as old fashioned. Well, there's Latin for you. Uh, a number of them are religious or otherwise not attractive or not meaningful anymore. And I also think that in the modern world, they're not consistent with, what's called branding, how you identify yourself to the public. So in the new world, instead of promoting a motto, you want an attractive logo, you want fewer words and more symbols. You want something to be kind of bold and modern looking with, the words displayed in a font that is, again, modern, attractive. But, well, I like all those mottos. My final words relate to colleges and universities. These institutions are unique. They are not business corporations. They're not governments. They're not social service organizations like the Red Cross. And even though a lot of them have, religious connections, they're not churches as such. There's a Latin term, sui generis, that applies to these. It means one of a kind. These institutions have a long history, as I said, going back to Bologna over 900 years ago. They have special traditions, and many, if not most of these, are embedded in and serve their communities in all kinds of ways. Colleges and universities have often been over, a long time, and including today, literally today, the subject of challenges. There are people outside these organizations who don't like them for one reason or another. But these organizations, colleges and universities, they offer their defenses. I'm not going to go into the details of any of this because I'm sure that those participating in this program are aware of this from the daily news. Well, my final message is I created a motto in Latin, Edificare difficile, destruere facile, which means to build is hard, to destroy is easy. That concludes the main part of my program. I have a few other comments. I want to roll some credits first to my wife, Christine, who taught classics at Rice for many years, who is a source of all things Latin and many things Greek. John Bowles, who used to teach history at Rice, who is a, well, a full source, I'll say, of everything relating to Thomas Jefferson. Melissa Kane, who has retired as the historian at Rice, and Katie DeVore, who's a genius at helping somebody like me prepare a presentation like this. And I just want to mention that I have covered their alma maters, or as the Romans would have said, alma matres. Christine, Bryn Mawr, and Stanford. John, Rice and Virginia. Melissa, Rice, and Katie, Puget Sound and Colorado. So thank you, everyone. Now, in similar presentations that I've done like this, I've had a couple of pages of, scholarly books and articles that I have consulted. But in this case, I have not found any what I would call general discussions about college and university mottos. Instead, what I have found are lots of lists. And the main list is there on Wikipedia. If you, they have a page called College and University Mottos, organized by country from Argentina to Zimbabwe, lots and lots and lots and lots. And of course, as I've said, a lot of these are in Latin, some are in English. You go to China, they're in Chinese, and India, they're in Sanskrit, and so on and so forth. And there are other lists of more sort of specialized mottos. But just as a matter of advice, if you're going to look into this, you can't rely on these lists because some of them may be out of date. So you need to go to the websites of these various institutions to verify what the current status is. Here's the appendix on Latin grammar and mottos if you're interested. How you can contact me if you have comments, questions, criticisms, or anything else to say. And here's some other recent works that I have presented. So thank you so much for participating. I hope you can participate with future things that I might do again. Thank you.